The Arctic wilderness was a land of stark contrasts, silent yet brimming with life, endless yet claustrophobic under its heavy white expanse. Mark adjusted the scarf around his face, the biting wind cutting through even his layered clothing. His sled creaked as it skimmed over the ice, the huskies pulling it with steady determination. For days, he'd been cataloging wildlife patterns, tracking migration routes that were shifting with the melting ice. But today, something felt different. A sound, a faint, almost imperceptible cry, broke through the whistle of the wind. Mark halted the sled, his gloved hand tightening around the reins. He strained to listen. The sound came again, softer this time, but unmistakably a cry of distress. Mark's instincts sharpened. He was miles from the nearest human settlement, and few creatures ventured this far into the barren expanse. Leaving the sled behind, he began moving toward the sound, his boots crunching against the ice. Each step carried him closer to the unknown, his breath fogging the air in rhythmic bursts. What he found stopped him in his tracks. Wedged between two jagged walls of ice was a polar bear cub, its pristine white fur matted with frost. The animal's front paw was trapped, and its efforts to free itself had only worsened the situation, deepening the fissure around it. The cub looked up at Mark with wide, frightened eyes, its chest heaving. Mark felt his pulse quicken. A polar bear cub was rarely alone, and its mother could not be far. He scanned the horizon, his eyes searching for any sign of movement. Nothing, only the endless stretch of white. Kneeling cautiously, he assessed the situation. The cub flinched, baring tiny teeth in a feeble warning. "Easy there, little one," Mark murmured, his voice low and soothing. "I'm not here to hurt you." The cub's struggle slowed, its energy waning. Mark realized he needed to act quickly. Retrieving a coil of rope from his pack, he fashioned a makeshift harness. His hands trembled, not from the cold, but from the weight of the risk. As he worked, he spoke to the cub, his voice filling the silence. "You're a fighter, aren't you? Bet you didn't think today would end with a rescue mission." The absurdity of talking to a bear was not lost on him, but it helped steady his nerves. Looping the rope around the cub's torso, he secured it tightly but gently. The next part would be dangerous. The ice around them was unstable, and the cub's weight could shift it further. Bracing himself, Mark pulled with all his strength, his boots digging into the icy ground. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a loud crack, the cub was freed. It tumbled onto the snow, sprawling in an undignified heap before scrambling to its feet. Mark stumbled backward, panting. The cub stood still, its dark eyes locked on him. There was no aggression, only a strange, almost human curiosity. For a moment, they stared at each other, two creatures from different worlds sharing an unspoken connection. "You're free now," Mark said, breaking the silence. The cub hesitated, then took a tentative step toward him. Mark's heart thudded in his chest. Was it gratitude? Curiosity? Whatever it was, the moment felt surreal. Before he could dwell on it, a distant roar shattered the stillness. Mark froze. His eyes darted to the horizon, where a massive figure emerged, an adult polar bear. The mother bear's approach was deliberate, her every movement a display of power and grace. Mark rose slowly, his hands held up in a gesture of peace. The cub, oblivious to the tension, waddled toward its mother, its cries now filled with relief. Mark backed away, his heart pounding. The mother bear's eyes lingered on him for a long, heavy moment. Then, with a low grunt, she turned and led her cub away, their figures blending into the endless white. As the pair disappeared, Mark exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He stood there, the cold seeping into his bones, his mind racing. The encounter had been perilous, yet profoundly moving. As he made his way back to the sled, the memory of the cub's gaze stayed with him, a silent reminder that even in the harshest landscapes, life had its way of surprising you. The wind howled again, but this time Mark felt its bite less keenly. There was something about that moment, something he couldn't quite name, that left him eager to return to this unforgiving land. The snowstorm arrived without warning. Mark gritted his teeth as the wind screamed, hurling ice and snow against him in an unrelenting assault. Visibility was near zero, the once clear horizon now a swirling chaos of white. His sled was gone, lost in the tempest when the dogs panicked and broke free. Alone in the heart of the Arctic, he was at the mercy of nature. Mark pushed forward, each step a battle against the storm. The terrain was treacherous, the ice shifting beneath his boots. His destination was a small research outpost 2 miles away, but the storm had disoriented him. Every direction looked the same. Then it happened. His foot slipped on an unseen patch of ice, and he fell hard, sliding down a concealed incline. Pain erupted in his leg as he came to a jarring stop against a jagged outcrop. Gritting his teeth, he tried to stand, but his right leg buckled beneath him. A sharp, stabbing pain shot through his knee, and he collapsed back onto the ice. "Damn it," he hissed through clenched teeth. His breathing was ragged, the cold biting deeper with each passing moment. He reached into his pack for the emergency flare gun, only to find it missing, likely lost in the fall. Mark's mind raced. He was injured, alone, and exposed to the elements. The storm showed no signs of relenting, and without shelter, hypothermia would set in within hours. He forced himself to think, to plan, but the pain in his leg clouded his thoughts. A sound broke through the howling wind, soft at first, but unmistakable. A low, guttural growl. Mark froze, his pulse quickening. Out of the swirling snow, a massive figure emerged. It was the polar bear. For a moment, Mark's mind rebelled against the sight. The same bear cub he'd rescued days ago now stood before him, but it was no longer alone. Its mother, the towering matriarch of the Arctic, loomed protectively behind it. Mark's instinct screamed at him to stay still. The mother bear's eyes bore into his, her breath steaming in the frigid air. The cub, smaller but still substantial, padded closer, sniffing the air. This is it, Mark thought. He was defenseless, injured, and entirely at their mercy. But then something unexpected happened. The mother bear didn't charge. Instead, she tilted her head, as if assessing him. The cub let out a soft whine, stepping closer. Mark didn't dare move. His mind raced back to the moment he'd freed the cub from the ice. Was it possible they remembered him? The idea seemed absurd, yet here they were. The mother bear grunted, a deep, resonant sound, and nudged the cub forward. To Mark's astonishment, the cub approached him cautiously. It sniffed at his injured leg, its wet nose brushing against his boot. Mark winced but remained still. The mother bear advanced, her massive paws crunching the snow with deliberate steps. Mark braced himself, but she didn't attack. Instead, she stood over him, her presence both awe-inspiring and intimidating. Then she did something extraordinary. Lowering her head, she nudged Mark gently with her muzzle, almost as if urging him to move. Mark stared in disbelief. Was she helping him? He didn't have time to question it. The cold was sapping his strength, and every moment spent lying there brought him closer to freezing. With great effort, he shifted, using his arms to push himself upright. The mother bear stepped back, watching intently. The cub let out a small growl, almost impatiently, and nudged him again. Mark leaned against the larger bear for support, her fur thick and warm beneath his gloved hands. Slowly, painfully, he began to move, the bears guiding him through the storm. Each step was a struggle, his injured leg dragging uselessly behind him. The mother bear's presence was a steady reassurance, her sheer strength keeping him upright. The cub darted ahead, its small form barely visible in the blizzard, as if scouting the path. Time lost meaning in the storm. Mark's focus narrowed to putting one foot in front of the other. The cold bit into him, but the bear's presence kept despair at bay. Finally, through the haze of snow, the outline of the research outpost emerged. Relief surged through Mark, giving him the final push he needed. The bears paused at the edge of the clearing, watching as he stumbled toward the small building. Mark turned, his breath hitching. The mother bear met his gaze one last time. There was no hostility in her eyes, only a quiet understanding. With a low grunt, she turned and disappeared into the storm, the cub following close behind. Mark leaned against the doorframe, his body trembling from exhaustion and cold. As he pushed the door open and collapsed inside, one thought echoed in his mind. The Arctic had taken much from him, but today it had given something back.